Hi guys, welcome to QSO 520, and today we are going to work on the optimization and linear programming models. We will solve this particular problem by using Excel, and today we're going to just solve this manually. However, we'll be solving this kind of questions by using Solver. So let's look at this problem. The problem says minimize z, where we have 11 of x and 3 of y. So this means that we are going to produce, and we would like to minimize cost of producing these two items, where the per unit cost of x is 11 and the per unit cost of y is 3. In other words, it will cost 11 to produce one item of x, and also it will cost 3 to produce one item of y. We're going to see how many of x we're going to produce and also how many of y we are going to produce. And this is limited by the number of constraints. So here are the constraints we have. And these are the limitations. And so from the first constraint, let's call it input 1, and therefore we're going to have input 2 and 3. So let's start with input 1. It will cost 4 of input 1 to produce one item of x, and it will only cost 1 of this input 1 to produce one item of y. And our limit is that we can use 12 of this input or more. So that's what we have here, is greater or equal to 12. Now let's see the second input. We have 18, and the only thing that we can do is we can utilize either all or less than 18. So that's why we have this limit. It should be less or equal to 18, where we can use 2 of this input to produce one item of x and 2 of this input to produce one item of y. And for the input number 3, we have 0. And the limit is we can either, we won't use this input or we use less of this input. And so that's the limitation. It says either 0 or less. And so we can use 4 of this input to produce one item, but we'll use negative 5 of this input to produce one item of y. Here we have what we call non-negativity condition, whereby x and y, which are the products, should be greater or equal to 0. In other words, it means that we cannot produce minus of a product, but we can either produce something or we won't produce. So if we are not producing x and y, then that means it's 0. But if we produce something, then that's going to be greater than 0. So that's what we call the non-negativity condition of this problem. So the next thing that we're going to do is to create our model, meaning that we're going to put this problem in Excel model so we can work on it. And I'm going to work on this side. So here I will write a company. Let's say assume that we have ABC company. And this company is producing two products. So we have product X and also we have product Y. And the per unit cost is 11 and 3. 11 for X and 3 for Y. We saw that we have limitations. This production is subject to these three inputs. And so we're going to look at the constraint number 1, and also we have constraint number 2 and number 3. So let's start with constraint 1, where we saw that it will cost 4 of input 1 to produce one item of X, and also it costs 1 to produce one item of Y, and that's for the constraint number 1, or input 1. So let's look at constraint number 2. In this case, it will cost 2 of this constraint to produce one item of X, and also 2 to produce one item of Y. And let's see for constraint number 3. So we have 4 and we have -5. So these constraints are limited, as we said before. So we have greater or equal, and then we have less or equal and less or equal here. So we have 12, and then we have 18, and we have 0. So this is a model which we are trying to create, and you can see that we are putting values in separate cells so that we can do the operations by using Excel. You can see here that everything is put together in one cell, and we won't be able to do some mathematical operations. So we are going to make X and Y zeros. So in this case, we are going to look at the first constraint and see if we put 0 for Y, then how much of X will be. And if we put 0 in X, then how much Y will be. So let's go with the first constraint. We have X and also we have Y. And so let's put 0 for Y in this equation here. We have 4x plus y, which is greater or equal to 12. So assume that we put 0 for y, then how much will it be for x? So if we put 0 here, it will be 3 for x. So you can ask me, how did we get this? Let me show you. So here we have 4x plus y equals to 12. So assume that we put 0 for y, 0 times y, it will be 0, and therefore we're going to have 4x, and that will be equals to 12. And so if we make x subject of the formula, so we'll take 4 to this side, and in this case we will divide 4 in one side and also on the other side. And if we use Excel function, we are going to take 12 divided by 4, and so it will be 3. So that means if we put 0 for y, x will be 3, and that's what we have here. Now let's try to put 0 in x. So in other words, if we put 0 here plus y equals to 12, then that means 4 times 0 will be 0, and therefore y will be equals to 12. And so in that case, we are going to write 12 here. Now let's look at constraint number 2. And we're going to do exactly the same as we just did for constraint number 1. And we're going to put 0 for y. Then what will be x if we put 0? So in other words, if we put 0 here, if we make y 0, then that will be 2 times 0, and that will be 0. And so we're going to have 2x equals to 18. And if we divide 2 for both sides, x will be 18 divided by 2, and that will be 9. So right here, 9. And then if we put 0 for x, what will be for y? So the same way, if we make 0, we make x 0, so it will be 2 times 0 plus 2 plus times y equals to 18. And so if we make y subject of the formula, then y will be 18 divided by 2, and that will be 9. And so if we can work for constraint number 3 as well. So here we have x and also we have y. And assume that we put 0 for y. What will be the value for x? So here we have 4x minus 5y, and that is equal or less or equal to 0. So if we put 0 here, it will be minus 5 times 0, and that will be 0. And so 4x will be equal to 0. So let's do it here to show how this works. So let's say 4x minus 5y equals to 18. And assume that we put 0, y is 0. So minus 5 times 0 will be 0. And so we're going to have 4x equals to 18. And if we divide 4 for both sides, we're going to have x equals to 18 divided by 4. So I'm going to use Excel function, and therefore I'll put equal sign, click on 18 divided by 4. Sorry, it wasn't 18, it was actually 0. So if it is 0, and so 0 divided by 4 will be 0. So you can see that if y is 0, and x will also be 0. And it will be the same way if we put 0 for x, definitely y will be 0. And so we cannot do so. All we're going to do is just to give the value to x or y. And let's assume that we give a value like, let's say 10 for x. So what will be y? And so in this case, if we make x to be 10, so that means 10 times 4 will be 40. And 40 minus 5y will be equals to 0. So here we have 40, and all we have to do is to take 40 to the other side, and it will be minus 40. And so we're going to have minus 5y. And so we can remove the minuses, and therefore we're going to have 5y equals to 40. And so y will be equals, so we're going to put equal sign and use Excel function, and we're going to take 40 divided by 5, and therefore y will be 8. And so we're going to write 8. Let me highlight them. So after we have created the constraints by putting zeros, then we can actually create graphs. So let's see how we can create graphs by using these values. So we are going to start by selecting the values for constraint number 1. And if we click on the insert, go to the chart, select the scatter. Here we have the scatter plot. And please select the scatter with straight line and the markers. Here you can see we have scatter. We have scatter with smooth lines and markers. Also, we have scatter with just smooth lines, but all I want you to do is to select the scatter and straight lines, scatter with straight lines and markers. So in this case, you can see that we have this one line, the line here. However, we need to modify this line. So in this case, I'm going to right click on the graph and select data. We're going to edit. Here we have series 1, but we would like this series 1 to be constraint number 1. And so I'm going to edit, and I'm going to put this as C1 or constraint number 1, and the series of X values should be these two values, not the values across. And also for Y will not be the horizontal, but we will select 0. That will give us the series Y. And I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to add C2 and also C3. And we will define the series. Series Y values for C2 will be 0 and 9. And for X, it will be 9, 0. And so we can see this graph here that is for C2. And I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to add the last one, which is C3. So I'm going to click there and type C3. So I'm going to select values for series X. And here we have 0 and 8. That will give us the series X values. And here I have to remove this. Just remove everything and then select 0 and 10. And that will be for X. And so you can see that we have this graph here. And I'm going to click OK.